guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is a bit of an update to a controversial style video I like to do semi-regularly. That's right, today I'm going to be chatting about book series I do not plan to finish. Obviously, I do a lot of reading around here, and despite the fact that I don't actually like to DNF books that much, I do try to be relatively on top of recognizing series I just don't see myself moving forward with. And today I actually have 9 series that I feel like I'm gonna stop continuing with. Again, this is nothing against these series. If you love them, that's amazing. I wish I did too. But for whatever reason, either because I really did not like it or just didn't really move me or compel me to continue on, I've decided to put these series to the side. But let's just go ahead and dive right in. The first series I'm going to talk about might not be too much of a surprise, and that is the Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. It's no secret, I love a fantasy romance story series. I'm always on the hunt for them. I think it's such a fun combination of all of my favorite things: princesses, war, supernatural creatures, and a romance. Like, what's there not to love? So needless to say, I was really excited to check out this series by Jennifer L. Armentrout, as it is kind of like a more medieval setting for vampires versus werewolves, which is a really classic showdown. I read the first 2 books in the series, and I didn't necessarily love the first one, but I did feel like it was compelling enough to continue on. But I found the second book to be completely without a plot and honestly very boring and very repetitive. And I also feel like the ante was being pushed in a direction, like it was trying to raise the ante, but it was also like very illogical to me, that I just found the plot to be very unconvincing, if you know what I mean. But if you're not familiar, this series is a very new adult fantasy romance. It definitely leans more in the romance direction. We follow our main character, who's pure. She's a religious figure, very pure. No one's allowed to touch her, talk to her, except the ruler. At the beginning of this book, she's assigned a new guard. You all see where this is going. They form a connection, yada, yada, yada. She begins to question everything around her, including the very government itself. She falls in love with her guard. She falls into the rebellion. Lots of things kind of take off from there. Again, generally intriguing plot, but it really falls apart, especially in the second book, and I just did not find it very compelling. And these books are so long. If these were 200, 300 pages, maybe I'd keep going to see if it got better, but they're 700 pages long. So anyway, this is a long-winded way to say I am not continuing the Blood and Ash series, even though I feel like I spent a lot of time in this series. I've just gotta let it go. Next up, I have To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. This is the only book I've read by Christopher Paolini, and needless to say, I was very disappointed when I ended up thinking it was super boring. According to the internet, this is the first of 4 books in this space opera series by this author, and unfortunately it was a huge letdown for me. And this is a story that follows our main character Kira, and she sort of dreams of adventure or kind of just exploring the outer reaches of the galaxy. But during kind of a routine surveillance for her job, she stumbles upon a piece of ancient alien technology which kind of attaches itself to her in the form of this suit, which also grants her very strong abilities. Unfortunately for her, this suit is not only not removable, but also kind of a beacon for everyone in the area to kind of go after her to try to claim this piece of technology for themselves. Also kind of flags down possibly the aliens themselves. So it kind of all escalates very quickly. I think conceptually, it's a really interesting book. I love a sci-fi story where you're kind of jumping from planet to planet. I love when we're also primarily on a ship and there's a crew to fall in love with. I just found all the characters in this book to be rather flat, and this is another very long story, and I felt like a lot of the action scenes felt very, very repetitive, and ultimately by the end I was ready for it to end. And I just don't really see myself checking out more books in this world, even though conceptually speaking, I do think it's interesting. But for a series that's supposed to be breakneck and so plot forward, I was bored, to be honest. And because of that, I just don't really see myself, reaching for books 2, 3, or 4. Obviously, if someone comes to me and it's Reagan, the first one's bad, but the rest of the series is amazing, who knows? but I have no plans, absolutely no plans. I don't even own the book anymore. It's gone. I don't think I own any of these books anymore. Next is the Crown of Feathers series by Nikki Powell Preto. This was a YA series I actually reread. In the rereading process, I feel like I completely changed my rating for it. Initially, when I read it, I thought I loved this series. It was such an interesting YA fantasy story that I felt like was really compelling. It basically is set in a world where there is this empire that sort of overthrew the previous regime, which was once ruled by very powerful warrior queens who could ride phoenixes. Now, though, any woman associated with magic is like hunted down, and a lot of people had to flee this empire when the new rulers took power. We follow two sisters that are connected to this regime, and they have been hiding their magic their entire life, and they also dream of finding a phoenix egg to become a phoenix rider. They have a very complicated relationship, and I think this is definitely the most compelling aspect of the book, this sort of sisterly bond that's also like rivals in some aspects. Follow our main character as she hatches a phoenix egg and actually disguises herself as a boy to become a phoenix rider, and things kind of begin to spiral from there. I think this book had so much potential. I liked the writing and the concept, but in rereading it, I really began to realize like how flat the plot was and how flat the character development was, and some aspects of the relationship felt very insta-lovey to me, and just not everything really added up in a way that I found it as enjoyable the second time around. It makes me sad because I really wanted to love this, but upon rereading it, I just don't know if I'm going to carry on with the rest of the books in this trilogy. I do think I'd check out other books by this author though, because there's aspects of their writing and their plotting that I did like. In a world where there's so many books I want to read, I just don't see myself kind of prioritizing books 2 and 3 in this trilogy anytime soon. With that same vein, I also have For the Wolf by Hannah F. Whitten. This is a book that I neither loved nor hated. It kind of sits routinely in the middle, and I think like as more time passes, and because it didn't really leave like a huge impression on me, I just don't really see myself like reading the next installment because I kind of just found the whole experience to be okay. Another one I feel like that could have been an absolute home run, but it just ultimately didn't come together in that way. This is like a fairy tale, folklore style, romance forward fantasy story. Again, so many things I love. So I was just as surprised as you were when I ended up reading this and giving it like a 2.75 stars. And this follows our main character Red, and she is the only second daughter of like the ruling family to be born in centuries, and she has been raised to be a sacrifice to the wolf of the woods. Essentially, there's this evil wood whose sort of dark magic seems to be more nefarious year over year and is kind of devouring the land and kind of threatening the people of this kingdom. The kingdom's hope is to basically feed Red to the forest to quell its hunger, but once Red is actually given up, she realizes that there is no wolf of the wood, but actually a magical man who's been trying to fight this forest like his entire life, and she kind of joins forces with him to sort of protect everyone she knows. There's obviously a complicated emotional element to this book, as Red was sacrificed by the one she loves most, and you actually follow chapters of her sister back at the kingdom, and you really see their sisterly connection, and you also begin to see a romance blossom. Again, I think on the surface, this book sounds amazing, but unfortunately it just didn't deliver that punch for me that really made me want to like keep reading and also check out book 2. This one hurts a little bit, but I just don't really see myself checking out the next installment. The next book on my list is A Master of Djinn. This is another one that hurts because the concept of this sounds amazing. It is a steampunk detective noir style story set in the turn of the century in Cairo. All of these things are super cool. We follow a young woman who is the youngest detective for the Ministry of Alchemy, and basically she investigates like enchantments and spells and all of these things. And at the beginning of this book, she's basically assigned to investigate a crime that is very off the rails, in that a powerful like magical brotherhood was completely murdered and no one really knows exactly what happened. The prime suspect seems to be a powerful magician that hasn't been seen in over 50 years. So there's a lot of complicated stuff going on. I love the world of this book. I think the steampunk elements really shined in this, but the reason why this is a series I feel like I'm going to DNF is because I guessed the ending, and I guessed the ending early. And I feel like for a detective thriller story, like so much hinges on the reveal. And the whole time I was like, oh, it's definitely a red herring. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening. And then I did get to the end and it was exactly what I thought. I was so let down because so much of it was fantastic. But like for me, because I guessed it, I feel like I'm always going to be like a little hesitant to check out other books. I just feel like if you know what's going to happen in a thriller, like it almost defeats the purpose of the thriller, you know, at least for me personally. Next up, I have Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This is a read I picked up earlier this year and unfortunately was just really underwhelming. Conceptually, this is another one I really thought I would love because it's a folklore leaning fantasy story. We follow the daughter of the moon goddess and she has spent her whole life kind of hiding and keeping her magic hidden with her mother until one day the evil celestial emperor actually senses her magic after a flare-up, resulting in our main character having to flee from home. From there, we follow her as she goes on an adventure through the Celestial Empire, gain training, all in hopes of saving her mother and defeating this evil king. Again, sounds cool, but unfortunately this book had severe pacing issues for me. I felt like everything was happening so fast to the detriment of feeling any type of like stakes and emotional connectedness to the characters and even the people who were like there and then dead and we're moving on. Like everything was so fast. I just felt like I could never really get my bearings. I felt like the world was super cool. I obviously love that this book was inspired by Chinese mythology. Again, such great potential, but unfortunately just did not land for me at all. The next two books I'm going to chat about are still kind of maybes. One of them I'm just trying to give the benefit of the doubt, and the other one got me in the last 5 pages of the book. But I feel like if the next one is even remotely bad, it's over for me. The first one I'm talking about is the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. I enjoyed the first one actually quite a bit, but I read the second one, House of Sky and Breath, and despised it. It just felt so pointless. There were so many men point of views. I felt like the plot was really irrelevant. Like the first chapter was so interesting and the last chapter were so interesting, and then there was like just 600 pages of like pointlessness. It also doesn't help that I really dislike the main character and the main romantic pairing. Normally though, I can get through this when I have other romantic pairings kind of scattered throughout a romance-centered fantasy story, but that was not the case in the series. I really just despise everyone, or the pacing was off, which was surprising because generally speaking, I find Sarah J. Maas books to be very entertaining, and this one just absolutely flopped for me, which I find to be very disappointing. But this is an urban fantasy story set in a city called Crescent City, which is a cool concept. It's basically a city comprised of lots of different magical and supernatural creatures, and they have different neighborhoods kind of controlled by these specific creatures. In the first one, basically our main character Bryce, after a tragedy, begins to investigate a crime, and she basically hooks up with this like hot angel like investigator, and they work together. It's a will they won't they. We go into book 2, things begin to escalate, the political significance of everything is really on the rise, yada yada yada, but there really was no increase of stakes until again the last 5 pages. And now I'm curious, and I'm so annoyed that the last 5 pages were so good because I feel like it's gonna work and I'm gonna read it because I'm curious, darn it. The last book I'm gonna talk about is Book of Night by Holly Black. The only reason I'm gonna check out book 2 of this series is because it's written by Holly Black, who historically I've really enjoyed her novels with beautiful writing, great romantic tension and pacing, really interesting magical worlds, all of these things that I love so much. But Book of Night was so underwhelming, from the plot to the pacing to the magic to the reveal. Like everything about it was just okay. And I was so sad about it because I was so excited about her first adult fantasy release. This book follows our main character Charlie, and she is a really good thief, but she's trying to kind of live life not on the edge anymore, and she works a regular job as a bartender. In this world that she lives in, shadows basically can have magic, and the power that shadows can manifest have like different versions. She herself does not have a magical shadow, but she used to work in the night market and basically sell magical items for money, but again, no longer. Until at the beginning of this book, some complicated things begin to happen, and she kind of has like one last job. Things really begin to get complicated. I do like that the author had chapters both set in the present and the past. I do feel like we got to know our main character Charlie pretty well and her motivation. conclusions. Unfortunately though, like the build up that she was building up just really did not have very interesting payoff, and the reveal was just so obvious from the beginning. And as I've already stated, I hate when I think something is so obvious it'll be a red herring and then I'm just completely not tricked at all, and it ends up just being so underwhelming in the end. And that's how I feel about Book of Night. I'm gonna give book 2 a try because I have like so many Holly Black books in the past, but again, short leash for sure. If I feel like it's boring in the first 100 pages, it's done. Alrighty guys, those are a few book series I do not plan to finish. Please let me know down below some book series you have DNF'd, as I would love to know, and I will see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!